When it comes to your children, there has to be this initiative where things are done way in advance, as I said earlier. Now, one of the most critical roadmaps to bringing good children into this world is the one that has been elucidated by the Holy Prophet, as well as many other traditions of subsequent Imams, the successors of Rasulullah, which is the 777 rule. You've probably heard this before. I wish to elaborate on it just a little bit in the remainder of my time. The Prophet says, and we have different variations of the hadith, but the gist of it is the same. He says you should divide your child's life into 3 phases. The first one is the first 7 years of his life. So the Prophet says, "Utrukhu sab'an." Leave him for 7 years. The second phase, after he turns 8, "Addibhu sab'an." Discipline him or her for the next 7 years. Then the third phase is when he or she turns 15. The Prophet says, وَصَاحِبْهُ سَبْعًا. Let's open this up just a little bit. أُتْرُكْهُ سَبْعًا means that the way you discipline your child has to be subliminal. You have to use indirect methods to educate your child. Translation, be a good role model for them. Be the kind of person that you want them to turn out to be. Which means that when it comes to prayer, fasting, doing good deeds, being truthful, not lying, all these moral characteristics that you want your child to possess when they grow up, make sure those are reflected on you. Why? Because a child's brain and personality is only developing in that phase. And instead of directly teaching them, instructing them, those verbal instructions aren't effective. Instead, they're scanning your every move. They're trying to figure out how you are, and they will mirror you. They will shadow you. In other words, tell them by your actions as opposed to your words. Now, some people might say, well, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the ideal person that I want my children to be like. That's fine. Pretend like you are. You know how when people work in the hospitality industry, I don't know if you've noticed, but you have people who, let's say for instance, they're an air hostess for an airline. Those who work in economy class, they have a different demeanor to the ones who work in business or first class. Do they pick different people with different personalities to be placed in these positions? No. But they train the ones who work in business or first class to be more respectful, more courteous. Even if that person isn't like this in real life. But that's how they're trained. Just like an actor simply plays the part. They could be a completely different person, but they're able to put on a persona and display it for other people. Is this a bad thing? Is this hypocritical? The answer is no. We have a hadith that say, مَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ حَلِيمًا فَلْيَتَحَلَّمْ. If you're not naturally a patient person, someone who's forbearant, someone who doesn't react to, terrible, bad, disrespectful circumstances, if you're not that kind of person, if you are reactionary, if you get upset really easily, the Imam says, at least act as though you are a patient person. Because the more you practice this, the more likely it is that you will adopt this personality trait. So, when it comes to my children, who mirror and shadow their parents in their every move, anyone who has a young child knows this. They will shadow you, and the slightest variations they'll be able to detect. They're incredibly smart when it comes to this. So much so that the hadith says that when you make your child a promise, make sure you keep it. Why? The Imam says, فإنهم لا يرونكم إلا أنكم ترزقونهم. Because your children see you as godlike. You're a giant in their eyes. So if you make a promise, even if it's something trivial, I'll buy you an ice cream, but then you don't, this will shatter their entire worldview. They will no longer trust you. They won't, in fact, trust anybody else. And so, act in a manner that provides them with a good role model for the first 7 years. Then comes the second phase, where the Imam and the Prophet, he says, أَدِّبْهُ سَبْعًا, which means now that you're 8 years old, things are getting serious. If you must nudge them in the right direction, if you have to pressure them to be good, to pray, to fast, to do good things, and so on and so forth, then you must. But then, of course, we see parents who are like, you know, our household is a place where we don't use the word no. I don't want to tell my girl to wear hijab because I want her to grow into it. Right? I don't want to get my son to pray. I don't want to force him because, I mean, what's the point, right? You want him to pray on his own, and so I'll give him some space. But when it comes to the most trivial things like brushing their teeth, you start out by brushing their teeth yourself. Then at the age of 2 and 3, you make sure you're standing there breathing down their neck so that they brush their teeth. When it comes to going to school, when it comes to doing their homework, when it comes to, making their bed, when it comes to cleaning the house, when it comes to taking their share of the household chores, all of a sudden, it's not about growing into it. They have to do it. They have no choice. As parents, you know how to do this. You are able to put and exert enough pressure to point them in the right direction and to develop good habits for them. But when it comes to religion, all of a sudden, no, I want them to be convinced. Well, who's doing the convincing? You're certainly not. You certainly don't have the skill sets to do that. You don't have the knowledge to do that. So who's doing it? أَدِّبْهُ سَبْعًا. Make sure that they understand now, not just by your actions and you as a role model, but also with clear instructions, follow-ups. Be there, ensure that they're doing the right thing. So this is the second phase. You step it up and you become more deliberate in your actions. Then the third stage, وَصَاحِبْهُ سَبْعًا. And I'll conclude with this. The Prophet says, accompany them. When they turn 15 or 16, now they're adolescents, they're teenagers, they're at a very delicate stage in their development. The Prophet says, be a friend to them. Befriend them. There should be no secrets between you anymore. I don't have my child's passcode to his or her mobile phone. Well, why should there be any passcodes in this household? And even if there are passcodes, because they don't want other people to pry on the contents of their phone, as a parent, I should have a relationship with my child where they don't keep this from me. I'm not saying you should spy on them, but there shouldn't be any secrets between us. Because we've spent the last 15 years fostering a loving, caring, but also deliberate relationship so that now we don't keep secrets from each other. But that's how we treat our children. We give them their own private rooms. We give them their computers. We give them their tablets. We give them their phones. We give them all the privacy they want. And they're like, why should you know what's on my phone? So the Prophet says, befriend them. Get close to them. Be as close to them as any member of their circle of friends. Sahibhu also means to accompany them, take them out with you. You're going out with your friends, take your son, take your daughter as a mother. Because think about it, having my child with me wherever I go also means that I'll watch out what I do and what I say. right? Parents in the company of their friends, they might feel comfortable and say things that they wouldn't otherwise say. But if your child was there, I would have to be at my best behavior, right? But again, this fosters an incredible relationship between parents and their children. Look at Rasulullah and how beautifully he says that one of the things a parent, or three of the things that a father should teach their sons is what? As-sibaha wal-rimaya wa rukub al-khayl. You've heard this hadith, I'm sure. But think about the choice of activities that Rasulullah has presented to us. Sibaha, swimming. Because when you're teaching someone to swim, you'd have to build trust, right? Because they think they might drown. And so a great deal of trust has to be created before this child is able to rely on me as a parent so that they would learn how to swim. As-sibaha. Then ar-rimaya, which is about going out into the great outdoors, engaging in these activities in the wild, right? You teach them archery, and it's a beneficial thing. It's a beautiful activity, but also fosters a better relationship between father and son because you're spending a lot of time camping out and so forth. How beautiful, my brothers and sisters, are the instructions and teachings of our faith. Bring me another religion that goes into this level of detail and provides these beautiful instructions. So, الرماية وركوب الخيل, horseback riding as the Americans call it, or horse riding more accurately. Horse riding is about how to deal with animals. Therefore, it requires patience. It requires the person to deal with someone who doesn't understand their language. They're not on the same wavelength. It's difficult to reason with an animal, and yet you have to find a way to compromise and to be able to subdue the animal so that you can ride on its back. علموا أولادكم السباحة والرماية وركوب الخيل. And thus you're able to produce a household that bonds and has the right set of circumstances and features that allows it to flourish. So once again, to wrap up, begin with the relationship you have with your spouse. Begin with the choice of spouse. Then the relationship. I'll mention this beautiful hadith as well. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, "Ma min shafi'in عند الله للمرأة خير من زوجها." He says, you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you? You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a woman to overlook your sins? There is no shafi', no intercessor for you in the eyes of Allah than your husband being pleased. Look after him. Again, as a woman, you have the power to do that. You have the power to treat him well, to respect him, to honor him, to give him the position that Allah has given him within the household so that he would then reciprocate and look after you. And so that's number 2. Number 3, to follow these guidelines and instructions. There are many books written on the subject of child rearing and child discipline in Arabic. One of the best books, it's a classic, is the book by Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Falsafi called At-Tifl Bayn al-Wirathati wa-Tarbiyah, translated by Sayyid Fadl al-Milani, may Allah bless him. Great resource. I don't know if it's been translated into English, but there are other resources available, many other books that mention the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt. My point is this: I'm not here to teach you how to raise good kids. I'm here to make you, number 1, aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. And number 2, the fact that you have to be deliberate, you have to be afraid, you have to be intentional and ensure that you have the knowledge to do the right thing. Once you've done all that, you're then able to create a family that produces wonders.